Tonight's congressional hearing on the insurrection may recount and relive that day for many Americans. And that has value. But let's be clear, that's not enough. The special committee was created to do more than that, explicitly to establish the facts of what happened to inform potential policy and potential punishment, which is one way to deter such future attacks. So by the end of these 6 hearings, the committee has a duty to try to answer the larger questions, which is our special report right now to end the hour. The questions: was the January 6th events initially a gathering that then got out of control, or were they a specifically planned attack? And was the effort to stop certifying then President-elect Biden's win a kind of futile series of machinations by random politicos, or part of an organized attempted coup by the incumbent outgoing president? One of the committee's main avenues to answer these questions involves going to the source and interviewing people, just as journalists interview sources during and after momentous events, something we've done right here on MSNBC. And the statements and admissions of Trump's own aides have shown what may not have been apparent in the weeks after Trump lost in November, that public complaints and far-fetched lawsuits were not one final performative grievance that led to what you see here. No, they overlapped with and morphed into actual plans to overthrow Trump's lawful final loss. It's something we asked a Trump lawyer about back at the time.
Our strategy is to make sure that we continue to challenge all of these false and fraudulent results.
This election was stolen by mail-in ballots.
We'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop.
The president is still involved in ongoing litigation related to the election.
What is the point of all this?
Well, the point of this, of course, is to get to fair and accurate results because the election was stolen and President Trump won by a landslide.
Now, let's be precise. Some of what those Trump lawyers said and did was legal. You can file lawsuits with no basis. They're called frivolous lawsuits. They're generally legally pointless, but that's not a crime. That is allowed. But notice the goals were moving even then. In that interview, Ms. Ellis, the lawyer, started pushing that they wanted their own results to show a Trump, quote, landslide, which did not happen. So Congress must probe how that became a potentially illegal conspiracy to commit voter fraud and elector fraud and install fraudulent electors who they thought might somehow override a state's entire lawful vote in the states that Biden won. Now, that goes beyond frivolous lawsuits, trying to seat fraudulent electors for the January 6th certification, while then President Trump openly demanded Mike Pence reject the Biden electors for basically any reason they could make up. Did you ever make calls like that regarding what you're calling these alternate electors?
Yes, I was part of the process to make sure there were alternate electors.
We fought to see the electors. The Trump campaign asked us to do that.
We, the undersigned, being the duly elected and qualified electors, hereby certify the following. For President Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida, number of votes 11.
New pressure from President Trump on Vice President Mike Pence to reject the electors.
The vice president has the power to reject fraudulently chosen electors.
It's not fraudulent electors, Ari. It's alternate electors. Because of the process, again, that's laid out in the Constitution under the 12th Amendment.
The last admission you heard there is from Giuliani's deputy, Boris Epshteyn, a Trump campaign lawyer, copping to a plot reported in January by Rachel Maddow and other journalists that is now under investigation by both Congress, we may hear about it tonight, and the Justice Department. That plot goes way beyond pressuring Mike Pence to magically declare Trump the winner, something Pence and his own lawyer knew was not constitutional, and they said so at the time. It goes beyond that. It goes to a plot that would appear to come from inside the Trump White House, recruiting lawmakers to stop or just sort of delay the certification of then President-elect Biden's win. Now, think about that. I was just very careful to note some of what was being done then might have seemed fanciful and ridiculous, but was lawful. Mr. Giuliani can file baseless lawsuits. People can talk and lie about the results of the election in public. In public, the First Amendment protects all kinds of speech, including lies, most of the time. But when you start having meetings of fraudulent electors in concert with other individuals in the White House and the president formally, publicly calling to seat fraudulent electors, that's voter fraud. That's elector fraud. That's why the word fraud keeps coming up. Now, part of this attack on democracy is not even contested. There are Trump aides who admit it. One was just indicted last week. Indeed, the only contested part would, according to them, sometimes boil down to whether to call overthrowing democracy a sweep or a coup.
We had over 100 congressmen and senators on Capitol Hill ready to implement the sweep.
A dozen senators now saying they will object, at least in some form, to the votes on the Electoral College.
We believe that if the votes were sent back to those battleground states, most or all of those states would decertify the election.
Several Republican members of Congress and senators, egged on by President Trump and his false claims of electoral fraud in this election, are going to object.
Do you realize you are describing a coup?
No.
No. To Mr. Navarro, it was a sweep. Mr. Navarro, like Mr. Bannon, is someone who has pushed harder, more vehemently in public to both overthrow the election at the time and to defend that act afterward, a kind of a public laundering, if you want to call it that, to say this could have worked and it could have been lawful or constitutional. Now, what else do those two have in common? They've both been indicted for going farther to defy the Congress and the investigation than just about anyone else, including Trump's own family members. So what might have initially looked fanciful or extreme or even like just poor judgment in the public square has started to look like something else if their hands were on the plot that intersected with Trump's calls to find any excuse, no matter how thin, out of court to overthrow the electors. So tonight's hearing digs into that. Congress has to probe who else was in on Mr. Navarro's admitted plot. And if the evidence shows it was his own rogue dream, okay, that would be good news for Donald Trump. But if it shows that the former president directed this and directed trying to seat fraudulent electors and directed a plot to commit massive voter fraud in Georgia and elsewhere, that starts to build evidence of a criminal conspiracy. The government, Attorney General Garland, always has an obligation to indict leaders of criminal conspiracies, no matter who they are. Not because of who they are, but no matter who they are. And that's the question hanging over these hearings. Is there evidence linking all these pieces into that orchestrated plot? Then there's the violence. Now, in all fairness, there were certainly people who went to that day's rally just to be at a rally, to protest, to exercise free speech. And remember, most Trump rallies did not turn into insurrections, so it could have been a reasonable expectation for some people that they were going to a rally, just a rally. But the Justice Department is already indicting others with sometimes damning evidence that there was this plan for the most serious crime possible against the government, sedition. And then there's this new video out today showing, well, let's take a look at how we've pressed some of those organizers of that rally.
My role that day was similar to my role at other events, where it had been to assist many others in organizing and executing a professional and lawfully obtained, permitted event there at the White House Ellipse.
The subpoenas seek planning and funding records, including any coordination with the Trump White House.
Roger Stone, a confidant of former President Donald Trump, flanked by men wearing insignias of a militia group.
11 people tied to the events and rallies that took place before the insurrection.
Create a crowd that would then be leveraged to facilitate the riots.
We knew what kind of logistics it took to move a crowd of that size.
Would you ever vote for him again?
I'll definitely be looking to support somebody else in the Republican primaries.
Alleging the attack was part of a broad and well-organized conspiracy.
A broad conspiracy. We know it was for Donald Trump's benefit. Was he in on it? That is the big question that hangs over tonight. It's a question of evidence, not politics.